Hello and welcome to the Chapter 255 review of Jujutsu Kaisen. There's a lot of hype awaiting this chapter because the last one that was released last week left us with a bit of a cliffhanger surrounding Miguel's sudden appearance. For those who forgot this man, Miguel was Geto's supporter in JJK 0 and a companion who helped isolate Yuta in Geto's attempt to subjugate Rika by stalling time and battling Gojo. So yeah, I'm sure no one really expects Miguel to win against the King of Curses all by himself, given that he lost to Gojo last time after slurping an absurd amount of his knuckle sandwiches. Still, the last panel in the previous chapter hints that Miguel might be able to do something to Sukuna and deal a fair amount of damage in some bizarre way as someone who quote-unquote went toe-to-toe with Gojo Satoru. That said, enough with the chit-chat, and let's get on with the Chapter 255 review. After Miguel saves Wee Wee from Sakuna, he jumps atop a certain building and reveals that Larue also made his entrance. You can remember him at some point in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 as Miguel's old companion who also participated in the night parade of the 100 Demons. Particularly his bizarre appearance might trigger that memory in your brain and help you recall that this character is from Geto's old family too. On the first page we can see that Larue is grabbing Kusakabe with an enormous hand, and that's because of his cursed technique, which I will explain later as that will be a huge part of the upcoming fight. A flashback appears afterward and shows Miguel without his cap, puffy beret style hat, or whatever you call that. Although the timeline of this scene is not exactly specified, speculations say that within the 1 month time skip, Larue travels to Africa with Yuta to visit Miguel. Larue's case is also the same, but this also hints that Miguel joined forces with the Jujutsu Society at some point after resigning from being Geto's official supporter. Going back, the two persuade Miguel to fight Sakuna, but there's no way he immediately accepts their request, especially because it is the King of Curses we're talking about here, someone that even Gojo failed to defeat. Battling him in his full form might mean instant departure to the afterlife. Therefore, Larue emphasizes that they just want Miguel to deliver the final blow to Sakuna after he gets weakened by Gojo. It's crazy how they already anticipated the possibility of Gojo's loss and are preparing backup plans after backup plans to ensure a bittersweet victory. I'm pretty sure they didn't expect Gojo's body to turn out that way though. Jokes aside, Larue and Yuta continue to convince Miguel by warning him that Tengen's merger, which is yet to be formed, may not stop at Japan's borders alone. Perhaps this might come as a threat to Miguel and his homeland, but he thinks it's better to fight a cursed spirit who is comparable to Godzilla rather than facing Sakuna. Put simply, he says it's better to confront an entity that can remove a part of the map from existence, like a certain prehistoric reptile, than a nerfed King of Curses. That statement is horrifyingly true, especially because Kenjaku successfully captured Tengen and is in the middle of obtaining a large amount of cursed energy via the culling game. The agreements he made with both ancient and awakened modern-day sorcerers will bring forth the cursed energy required to eventually merge Tengen with humanity to create a powerful cursed spirit. Anyway, the chapter continues with Yuta offering to do a dogeza to persuade Miguel since he refuses to help and instead wants to stay in Kenya and protect his companions. Now, for those who are wondering what in the world a dogeza is, Takaba actually did it in his battle comedic acts with Kenjaku in chapter 241. In fact, his prostration was so perfect that Kenjaku took a moment to praise how stellar it was. As the flashback goes on, Miguel has a private talk with Larue, and it turns out that the latter still wants to make Geto a king, even though it's practically impossible due to Kenjaku. Miguel did everything in the past because he wanted to support Geto, but with Geto being out of the game, he just had no reason to be involved with the country's jujutsu matters. Apparently, Miguel only trained Yuta because he's bringing the favor back to Gojo, who let him off the hook back in JJK's prequel. So, with how things are turning out recently, Miguel has no real objective that can serve as his purpose or motivation. Larue mentions their old group's love and support for Geto and that they should mourn for him. Miguel unsurprisingly takes it as, "You're telling me we should take revenge for what happened, or do you want me to take Geto's body back from Kenjaku?" However, what Larue means by mourning is that they should fight with everything they have to tell Geto, "Man, take care in heaven." Larue phrases it as blasting requiem to the heavens, which just shows the amount of respect they have for Geto and how much his ideals influence his team. However, here comes the most hilarious part of the chapter so far. Miguel pauses for a moment and corrects something from his old ally statement. Then he just went out of the way and said, "Okay, first thing first, you surely mean he went to hell." Ironically, it's thanks to that half-joke that Larue successfully convinces Miguel to mourn Geto's inanimation by battling against Sakuna, although with some conditions put in place. First and foremost, Miguel will only confront Sakuna when Gojo and Yuta lose. He also wants Sakuna to be unable to cast domain expansion one way or another, and lastly, Larue will fight alongside him for the power of friendship to occur, or something along those lines. Finally, the scene returns to the present time, and we are off to a 2-on-1 battle with Larue and Miguel teaming up to bring down the weakened Sakuna. The contents in the checklist are all marked so far, given that Sakuna still has his reverse cursed technique weakened, rendering him unable to properly heal. Sakuna's 2 lower arms are no longer suited to battle too, after Gojo hits him with his final purple hollow technique in chapter 235. Topping it off with Sakuna's unhealed heart, Larue showcases his cursed technique, Heart Catch, and takes hold of Sakuna's body, hindering his movements as Larue slams him to the wall. Wow, Sakuna has been prone to surprise attacks these past few chapters. For starters, Larue's curse technique allows him to grab the target using an imaginary hand. This was the ability he used earlier to save Kusakabe, and this skill, particularly the gigantic hand, is capable of restoring itself once destroyed. Unfortunately, the only downside is that Larue will still suffer 1/10 of the damage his cursed technique receives. Now, 10% doesn't seem scary at all, but that still means that powerful attacks like Black Flash will inflict a significant amount of damage to Larue when his cursed technique gets torn down. Sakuna easily recovers from being sandwiched between a hand and a wall and counters the blow by sending slashes at the two. But while Larue reluctantly receives the heavy blows, Miguel, on the other hand, dodges all of them with ease, even going as far as jumping in between Sakuna's attacks. This feat is undeniably exceptional since Miguel wasn't seen like this in the anime when he was keeping Gojo occupied while Geto was on his way to subjugate Rika. Miguel was doing pointless hit-and-run maneuvers that time, with of course a lot of moments straight up eating Gojo's attacks. To be fair, Miguel manages to hold on for a few minutes thanks to his cursed item, Black Rope, which was destroyed by Gojo, as mentioned in chapter 145 when the crew talks to Tengen. Nonetheless, Miguel's sick maneuvers simply mean that there's hope he can go toe-to-toe against Sakuna, especially now that his cursed energy is still nerfed and he can't use his domain expansion. On top of it, Miguel's movements are becoming quite entertaining to Sakuna, to the point that he pays little to no attention to Larue and his gigantic hand. Sakuna is particularly exhilarated seeing Miguel's cursed technique, Hakuna Lana. Using the rhythmic beats etched in his body, Miguel expels curses and enhances his physical prowess at the same time, which explains how he can smoothly move while dodging Sakuna's slashes. The scene continues with another short flashback in Kenya on a different timeline than the first one. Here, Gojo informs Yuta about Miguel's curse technique, saying that Hakuna Lana can bring out buffs and debuffs to Miguel and his opponent without using a domain. Undeniably, that is a handy curse technique, and Miguel probably used that in his fight with Gojo. According to Gojo, however, Hakuna Lana is not necessarily a scary ability, despite the effects it can have on the user and his enemies. Obviously, Gojo might just be saying that because he's a special grade sorcerer and all, and the same goes for Yuta, which means the not scary part only applies to strong sorcerers like them. Of course, that also implies that Hakuna Lana is by no means terrifying to the likes of Sakuna. However, Gojo adds that what's really threatening about Miguel is his physique, which is truly frightening when combined with his cursed technique, particularly since Japanese sorcerers mainly rely on cursed energy to strengthen themselves. Gojo undoubtedly means that statement as a compliment. but maybe he could have been more careful in his words because for Miguel, that is just plain discrimination. He low-key labels Gojo as racist by mainly talking about his physical features, emphasizing there are also black people who are non-athletic and what makes him special is not his color or race. Instead, Miguel is simply extraordinary because it is him, nothing more, nothing less. Funny enough, Gojo apologizes to Miguel with sincere respect because the man is utterly offended by Gojo's compliment. Certainly, I didn't expect to see that there, but I'm definitely glad to witness Gojo apologizing. These flashbacks also introduce Miguel to us in more detail, which is good as he is becoming more and more of a likable character, rather than a simple, interesting sorcerer, who may possibly be taken down later in the fight. What's more interesting though, is Gojo saying he'll win against Miguel in a marathon, but will lose in a sprint. That's a metaphor hinting that Miguel has a sure chance of winning in short-term fights, even against Gojo, when cursed techniques are banned in a match. The next page shows Miguel grabbing one of Sukuna's arms to land a heavy blow. Larue is nowhere to be seen at this moment since he almost fell prior to this exchange. Nonetheless, Miguel's efforts keep Sukuna occupied so Choso can make his return with a freaking supernova. What's more, Yuji launches a surprise attack by slamming Sukuna right after landing atop him. So yeah, finally, these brothers rejoin the battle since Yuji failed to use his newly attained reverse curse technique properly in chapter 252. Choso helps him recover that time, and they didn't appear in these past few chapters, while other sorcerers like Maki and Kusakabe are having their fair share of moments with Sakuna. But because Yuji and Choso haven't really kicked the bucket like other characters in the manga, it is within expectations for those two to return at some point in the story. Their entrance here is quite grand, to be honest, so let's move on to more surprising developments. Along the battle, the narrator explains that Sakuna must cast Enmaten, the hand sign used to activate the malevolent shrine when activating the world-severing dismantle. He was incapable of doing that due to having only one arm before transforming to his OG form, and instead resorted to a binding vow to end Gojo for good. However, surprise, surprise, the following panel shows Sakuna's hands flying off to the walls as if they're sick of chants and incantations. This is actually a big thing since Sakuna becomes less capable of activating the world-severing dismantle because Maki reappears with a mad smile to do the king the favor of removing those palms. Maki possibly recovered from getting hit by Sakuna's Black Flash because it was mentioned in the old chapters that she acquired some sort of self-healing ability even without a cursed technique. Yuji, on the other hand, likely finds hope in the fact that Sakuna can't complete the Enmaten hand sign, so he rushes to end the finishing blow. However, Sakuna responds with a Black Flash against Larue, making it his second since the first one that hit Maki. Unfortunately, the chapter ends with a reminder that Gojo restored his lost reverse curse technique by landing a second Black Flash, which means that Sukuna might have recovered his too. The narrator didn't confirm if Sukuna really restored his reverse curse technique after the second Black Flash, like Gojo, but it is pretty obvious that the King of Curses did it. If he truly was, then expect the battle against Sakuna to stretch out a bit longer. After all, recovering the reverse curse technique means that Sakuna will be able to heal his heart and body again. It's such a shame, especially after this chapter just brought out the comebacks of three main combatants that can damage Sakuna and Megumi's souls, in the case of Maki and Yuji. Still, it's possible that a stronger sorcerer like Yuta, for example, will also return as they are in the middle of recovery, thanks to Shoko. In that case, the next chapter may be about Sakuna's reverse curse technique recovery. Yuji and the others will surely try to stop him in some way, and it may be useless. So I just want to emphasize this phrase at the end of the chapter. The ominous black lights shine beckons an ill omen. This basically gives out Sakuna's recovery, right? It's safe to wait for official announcements though, even if it might disappoint many. Anyway, I'm willing to see who'll make a grand return in the following chapters. I believe we may see a different viewpoint that shows what exactly happened to Kenjaku after the rampage of his cursed spirits. That, or the continuation of the showdown against Sukuna. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Thank you for watching the review, and see you in the next chapter. Press like if you enjoyed the video, and if you don't want to miss out on future JJK chapters like this one, definitely subscribe and hit that bell icon.